Hi there, everyone. Happy launch day for Permission to Grieve. If you're watching this in the future, today is September 4th, 2019, and it's the very first day that Permission to Grieve is available on Amazon, on paperback, on ebook. And the reason I'm filming today is because I got my author's copy in the mail, and I'm getting ready to do, I call these unboxing videos. I'm going to do an unbagging video, unenveloping video of my book Permission to Grieve. Now this book is going to be a little bit different than the paperbacks that you'll receive. It's going to have a very special bar across the top that says author's proof, and this is something that only the author of the book can order, but more or less it's kind of like a preview for what's to come, so I can look at page layout and things that are already happening in the book. So when you guys order your copies, the inside will look exactly like this one does. So opening this for the very first time, and this is something I got to order in advance of Permission to Grieve hitting Amazon officially. While the paperback was in review, Amazon asked if I would like an author proof, and I said yes. So I got one. Just tearing into this puppy here. I'm already so excited. I'm so fun on Christmas and other holidays too. I love receiving gifts. Oh my word. Oh my goodness. Here it is, guys. This is Permission to Grieve. There's a little band across the middle that says not for resale, not for resale, which of course I can never sell this anywhere else. This is my own personal author's copy to keep. Permission to Grieve, Creating Grace, Space, and Room to Breathe in the Aftermath of Loss by Shelby Forsythia, the host of Coming Back. And I actually got this idea to put the podcast on the front of the book from Nora McInerney, who hosts Terrible Thanks for Asking. Her most recent book called No Happy Endings has the Terrible Thanks for Asking logo on the front, and I was like, that's really clever and a great way to promote the podcast as well, so I will. And this is the back of the book as well. I designed the front and the back cover of the books, and it looks like the only error is that they double barcoded the book thus far that I can see. So I have my own barcode that I put on the book, and then Amazon has its barcode as well. But everything else looks great. I've spell checked everything. This is really delightful just to have in my hands. And there's the cover page inside. There's an even better cover page, and the podcast logo's in there again too on the second page that says, thank you so much for reading this book. If you'd like to listen to the show, we'd love to have you on. And I just absolutely love this layout. And this is the page I really want you to see, grief growers. I don't know if you can read this. It's probably going to be backwards. It says, for my heart and yours too, and in memory of my mother, Sandy Forsyth, 1962 to 2013. So this book was something that I created for myself as a grieving person, the person that I was when I was 21 years old in 2013. But also I created this for the person that you are in the midst of your loss as well. And I know that no two griefs are alike, no two experiences are alike. But there are some universal truths in grief. There is this universal feeling of the rug being pulled out from under you, of needing to abandon myself because society says my grief is not welcome. So many other things that come. And this is just so exciting to have in my hands. The margins look great. The illustrations look great. This is so phenomenal. Holding this up here. This is backwards from what it is in the book. This is a chapter called The Wolf in the Basement, and I compare my grief a lot to a wolf that I kept trapped in a deep, dark basement because I just couldn't figure out how to face it. And wolves, when they're imprisoned, they're pack creatures. They howl and they screech and they whine and they pace and they freak out, and that's what my grief was doing, kind of under the surface, but I had no idea how to deal with it. And by granting myself permission to grieve, I gave myself the power to not even face the wolf, but to embrace the wolf. And that was really, really incredible. And just one small piece of Permission to Grieve. And a really cool part of Permission to Grieve that I've gotten a lot of great feedback on so far of people who've gotten advance copies are these things right here. They're called pause buttons. And there's probably about 20 to 30 of them in the whole book. And they're these little questions that prompt you to just think about what's going on in your grief and your loss. They're not necessarily requirements to journal, like there's really not space to journal in the book. If you want to journal alongside as you're reading Permission to Grieve, that's totally doable. But if you would just like to ponder them as well, that's really helpful too. And especially if you're reading an ebook, and I know a lot of people are waiting on the audiobook for Permission to Grieve as well, and that's coming. It's in review with Audible right now. if you're listening, they're just kind of more things to ponder than they are to actually write down. But if you're a writer like I am and that speaks to you, absolutely. Just a note for other self-published authors that are watching this video, the quality of this is really good. I requested a matte cover, so you notice if I bent it in the light, there's absolutely no gloss or sheen at all, which I love. And it kind of feels better under my thumbs. I have a texture thing sometimes where certain textures wig me out. And this one does not at all. It feels like a book when I hold it in my hands, and it's not got that sheeny commercial gloss on it, which I don't appreciate at all. The inside's really nice. I requested black on white print instead of black on cream. This is a picture of mind circling, something else I talk about in grief, where you're just stuck in this loop in your brain of anxiety and thinking about your future and pain and her last breath and all these things that kind of spin around in your head and torture you. The typeset looks absolutely great. I used a freelancer named Annette on Upwork. If you'd like her information to format your own ebook, I'd love to send it to you as well, or paperback as well. There's just so much good stuff in here. I can't believe it's here in person. I'm just having a moment right now because I've wanted to be a published author since I was 5. I have wanted to put a book into the world, and I had no idea it was going to be this one. I had no idea that Permission to Grieve, or a book about the loss that absolutely tore my life in two, was going to be the book that came out of me. When I was a kid, I would write books about My Little Pony and fiction stuff in middle school about like magical fairies that lived in this land, and they all had names and different powers, and I never really walked into nonfiction until after I lost my mom. And then all of a sudden it was all I read, it was all I absorbed, and all of a sudden it was all I wanted to produce as well, which is how Coming Back started, which is how the podcast started. And then the book as well is just this amalgamation of all the different things we have permission to do in loss that no one explicitly tells us we have permission to do. And for some reason, society gives us all these things we're not allowed to do in grief, as in you're not allowed to talk about it, you're not allowed to keep physical objects around your home, you're not allowed to change the person that you are because of loss, but nobody comes along and tells us that we have permission to have these feelings, to change our identities, to act in ways that reflect the loss that we have faced, and this is a book for that. And it's a combination of the things that I've learned in the 6 years since my mom died. So there's personal stories from my own loss. There's little segments in here where I had my grief growers answer questions about things they were not allowed to feel, be, or do in the aftermath of loss. And then there's also these cool illustrations and the pause buttons and these moments for reflection and deeper, more of like a personal processing of what's going on for you. So it's not quite a memoir. It's not quite a self-help book. It was very hard to categorize on Amazon, but I did choose my categories carefully. It's kind of a mutt of a lot of things, of part memoir, part self-help, part compassion, personal development, self-development, and part spiritual as well, but not in the way that we need to communicate with the universe, or I'm not asking you to believe in some kind of higher power, but just to believe that there's more than where you are right now. And there's a part of the book in the back called Permission to Hope, and I think I want to read this to you today. It's a little segment in the back. It's my send-off on Permission to Grieve, and then I'll let you go buy the book for yourself, because there's so much more in here than I can possibly relay in a 10-minute video. So the last chapter of Permission to Grieve is called Wrapping Up Permission to Hope. I wrote this book because it is the permission slip I wish I had had in the aftermath of my mom's death. I hope it has provided you with some insight, breathing room, and validation in your own loss. I hope you start giving yourself permission not only to acknowledge and honor your grief, but to give it room to speak, move, and grow with time. Society doesn't give us permission to grieve, but we can. The power to reclaim the grief, which already inherently belongs to us, is ours. No one but you is stopping you from saying yes to the experience, the identity, and the action of grief. You have that power, and no one can take it away from you. I will never promise you that this road is easy. Granting myself permission to grieve opened me up to more heartbreak, agony, and shock than I had ever thought I would experience. But here's the thing. In granting myself permission to grieve, that heartbreak, agony, and shock became mine. I saw them and held them as my own, and saw their roots, my grief, as my own too. And that calling home of grief became my lodestar in loss. I was no longer a fragmented, self-abandoning griever, denying and resisting the reality of my life and my grief. I was a willing participant, albeit in a crying and raging and grumbling way, in my life again. I stopped holding myself and my spirit at arm's length. I picked myself up off the floor. I re-engaged with my broken heart. I let the wolf out of the basement. And that reconnection with my grieving self is something I wouldn't give up for anything. When we refuse ourselves permission to grieve, we shut off a vital piece of our hearts that needs seeing, expressing, and loving. A wounded child, a raging wolf, an injured spirit. This is society's teachings of life rejection and self-abandonment at work. When we give ourselves permission to grieve, we embrace the child. We release the wolf. We heal the spirit. We run towards what scares us most, only to find that it is ourselves. And it's not so much scary as it is afraid. And we don't want the fear to go away as much as we want the fear to be seen, heard, and wholeheartedly loved. Permission to grieve helps us pull our grief into ourselves instead of pushing it away. Permission calls us home to ourselves. It brings us back to where we belong. And it reminds us that we are safe, sound, and secure, even when everything around us is falling apart. What is cast out is retrieved from the garbage. What is shamed and belittled is summoned to the center to be nourished and fed. What is pressed down and forced out is welcomed in all of its magnificent grieving glory. You have permission to grieve. You have always had permission to grieve. Claim it. It has always been yours for the taking. You are seen, known, and loved beyond measure. By me, and by you too. Because even through grief, we are growing. And that's the last bit. That's the last chapter of Permission to Grieve. I hope there's no spoilers in there for any of you. This is a message that I've been relaying across Coming Back for at least a year, if not longer. These conversations on permission, allowing, welcoming, embracing the process of, the experience of, the identity of, the action of a grief. These are conversations that have been happening in little bits and pieces for over a year and a half for me. And finally, I was like, I got to put all this in one place. This is it. This is those conversations. And I'm just so excited they're here. This is not my only book. This is my first book. This will not be my only book. I can guarantee it. And I'm just so grateful that it's here. I just can't believe it's real. I'm having a moment right now where I'm like, it's between my fingers. It's between my hands. Like, holy crap, it exists in real life. I've just always wanted this, and I'm so grateful it's here. I can't believe it. The cover design is mine. I'm so proud of it. Back cover design is also mine. The interior, all the illustrations, all the text, that's all me. Just the layout was from my beautiful Upwork freelancer. I will give a shout out to my editor, whose name is Lisa Howard. She did 2 magnificent comb-throughs of this. The forward is written by my very, very dear friend, Stephanie Zamora, who was my very first coach, mentor, person on the road ahead, just a little bit, in the aftermath of my mom's death, and she's just remained a very strong guide for me ever since. So I'm so honored that she wrote the foreword for Permission to Grieve. And then the other people I want to thank today, just before I close this video, because I know I'm getting a little bit long, is my launch team for Permission to Grieve and my Patreon supporters. These two together are like the dual force that got Permission to Grieve into the world. So my launch team were the people reading the drafts behind the scenes and looking at illustrations and providing feedback. My Patreon supporters actually threw money at this thing. They've been supporting me financially on Patreon for a little over a year now, and their monthly contributions in exchange for weekly grief journaling and live coaching sessions with me and kind of grief guidance once a month that we do together in a chat room. In exchange for that, they pay a small amount of money. It starts at $1. You can do $1 a month and get all of those things. That money has funded Permission to Grieve. It costs money to publish a book. This costs money to bring into the world, and having that faith, having people in this thing who are like, yeah, I believe in this, I want this to exist in the world, bring it forward out of you, is just really, really powerful. So the people who've been cheering on the sidelines, the Permission to Grieve launch team, and my Patreon supporters as well, I just could not be more grateful for you. I'm very impressed with Amazon's quality of books. This is all self-published. I did not go through a publishing house, so Amazon had a very smooth process for uploading all of this. The quality is great. It looks like it's going to hold up for a long time. I'm going to highlight, write in it, earmark it, use it for all kinds of things. And I'm just so thrilled to be here. It's launch day. It's surreal. It's not quite real yet. It's freaking me out. But at the same time, it's so, like, I'm going to wake up and look over at my desk and it's still going to be sitting here. And I'm just going to be so thrilled and in awe and grateful. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching, I hope you give yourself permission to grieve, whether in the book form, the ebook form, or the audiobook form, which is soon to be released in the future. I hope you're going easy on yourself in your grief, whatever loss you're facing, death, divorce, and diagnosis. I hope to meet you sometime soon, whether it's through the podcast coming back, through the Grief Growers Garden, in my email inbox, wherever you'd like to stay in touch. I'd love to hear about your journey, what you think of the book. And please, 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 if you think of it, leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. I have this listed in both places. You can buy it on Amazon, leave a review on Amazon. You can also mark it as reading, want to read, already read in Goodreads, and leave a review there. Anything helps. Everything helps. This little book about grief, loss, and coming back, get into the world. Grace, space, and room to breathe in the aftermath of loss, because we could all use a little more permission to grieve. Thank you so much for supporting this project and this journey. Happy launch day. I'm just so excited. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It is here, it's here, it's here. I see you. I am proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you, because even through grief, we are growing.